All right, so we are going to attempt to finish these last three. We're talking about part 2 of that 90-minute Aimplan challenge in the first video. So if you haven't seen the first video, everything in green is what we covered. So these last 3 topics should be fairly straightforward. I'll try to put together a little bit more detail for the forecast review page and the gross margin review. But in terms of updating the status visual from that forecast page, that should not take very long. We'll just kind of go through how that can be set up and then move on to forecast review and the gross margin review. But shooting for an hour may take less, may take a little bit longer, but at the end of this video, we will cover everything that we were originally trying to target for that 90-minute Aimplan challenge. So I'm going to kick that off. I'm going to hop over to the forecast page and unpause visuals. Go ahead and refresh. And I think where we left off before is we still had some tables to pull in from the portal. So we have the Aimplan status storage table. That's where the actual stage or point in time that each subcategory will be written back to. So our target table for this specific visual. But then we also need to bring in the process visual and the sub-process visuals, or the process table and the sub-process table out of Power Query. I think that's what we were aiming to do with this specific query. So you see both process and process status. For this first one, we'll do process. Make sure that's loaded as a direct query. Duplicate that. And the process status is not necessarily required in order to do the write back, but it will be used if you have any type of review page. So process status, for the dim process table, we see both individual processes that were set up on the portal. Just a reminder, if we go to our processes section of the portal, we see a sales process and a AdventureWorks sales forecast process. And then of the available statuses, we're saying no work done, needs review, and final are the 3 that are going to be tied to this specific process. But as it relates to the process status dimension table that's there, all of these are going to be available. You can choose to filter or keep them in there. For the purposes of this example, I'm going to go ahead and just filter for the AdventureWorks process. It's going to have the ID field of 2 for the sub-process key. This is what will set up the relationship based off of on the fact table, or that status storage table. Then if we go into the process status, go back one. We really only want no work done, needs review, and final. For now, we'll plan to just keep all of these in there. And I'm just going to add these two new tables into the Aimplan layout. Talked about how the sub-process key is going to be our key between the two tables for the relationship. Right now, nothing has been written back to the status visual. And within the status visual, the value that is recorded is going to tie to the processes that were defined in the portal. And we'll look into the portal as we start moving some subcategories into a new status, just to show you what will come through on those tables. And then we already have the relationship with scenarios as well as the relationship with subcategory. And if we're looking at our visual, I'm going to keep the scenario key and I'm going to remove the status measure we had as well as sub-process key. And we're going to actually use the subcategory in the key fields as well as the sub-process key from the aim process dimension. Before I add sub-process, I'm going to see, but before I add the subcategory, I'm going to bring in my status measure based on the value from the aim status storage table. I'll just take the max and I'm going to shrink this a little bit. So even though we only have one sub-process coming through in the actual Power Query, I'm going to filter it down to just a single sub-process key, which would be the AW example. And then if we toggle on the show items with no data, right, so no data, nothing's coming through. That's because nothing's been written back. So it doesn't know what is available, and we have that limitation to say only show items where there is data. We want to toggle that setting back on to show items with no data. And we now see the three possible statuses that are available or tied to this specific status storage table. So even though we did not filter this down, the status visual knows, okay, for this specific storage table, these are the only ones that should show up. Gonna add a little bit of formatting on there. And so within widget subcategory, let's say we can move that to the needs review status. And then if we go back to the portal, within the AW status table, let's see if anything's going to be written in. And while that's going, let me double check that I had. Okay, so we don't have subcategory in there yet. Guessing that is what is preventing this from being written back. We add in subcategory and then change this to needs review. We now see this come through. Within the data preview on the portal, we're saying this was updated on 4/22. We have a specific commit ID of, okay, what was submitted. It went to AdventureWorks 1 scenario key, subprocess key 2, and value 5. This is all paired with the widgets subcategory we had created using the data input visual. So the 2 is representative of process AW_example, and then the 5 represents, hey, this is in the needs review status definition. If we switch this to road bikes, maybe we put this to final, and mountain bikes, put that as no work done. And maybe do the same thing on another. We go back to the portal. We now have 5 records, mountain bikes and jerseys, no work done, road bikes is final, and widgets is needs a review. That's our 4 records paired with the status visual. We've now shown structure set up for the status visual. There is the ability to add roles in there, but rather than kind of showing as or view as another role or another user, we're going to just have this be open to where anyone can move the status between or move the upload to a different status if they want to. That is possible, maybe not something we're going to cover in this specific challenge, maybe in a future video or intermediate advanced features related to Aimplan. Right. Before we go into forecast review, I'm going to add a couple more forecasts in here. And let's just double check how many currently have a forecast loaded. All right, so we're saying 5 subcategories have a forecast loaded. And I'm going to test the waters with suggested values. We will change this to forecast E2. Remove the comments feature for now. We'll remove the status visual. And rather than grouping by subcategory, right, so we had markets in the row section with a slicer for product. We're going to switch that to be slicer by market, and then row section by product category or product subcategory. Let's start with North America. We see our 6 submissions. I guess 5 and then the subtotal. And we had originally added in a 2018 sales measure. We added that as a suggested value. It doesn't look like it's coming through. So I'm going to do a little bit of validation there and see what's going on with that. All right, so we're going to update our date visual. It looks like the actual data type that was assigned needs to be updated. We don't want that to actually be summarized. So then we can actually use that in fields. And I'm going to pull in sales actuals here as well. All right, so rather than forecasted sales, we're just troubleshooting what's going on in the 2018 sales measure. I'm going to pull in one of the slicers from the other page. All right, so for this, it looks like the value's coming through as expected. But it's not coming through for the actual suggested value here. And this is where I think we need to add an all statement related to the date integer key. So it's not going to change how this is coming through for a non-Aimplan visual, but whenever we're talking the actual calculation of a measure, sometimes these key fields are going to be impacted. A great way to test the waters with this is to make a copy of that Aimplan visual, change it to a table, and just see, okay, where is 2018 sales coming through, and why is it not coming through accurately? Go back to subcategory. Jerseys. So we now have a value coming through. If I were to go back to our original DAX that we had set up, right, the value comes through at the total level, but it's not coming through at the individual month reference. When we add that all statement back in there, we now get our desired end result. So with that, our 2018 sales is now looks to be a little bit more accurate. If I take off some of the changes that we've already made on this page, go back to that selected value or the suggested value, we now see something come through for road frames. Let's go ahead and do this for, let's say, the first couple rows. and then some of the bikes as well. As touring bikes. And it's possible we just didn't have sales for these other categories. All right. Then we're going to hit plus, let's go plus 12%. We're going to add 12% on top of that of whatever the 2018 initial sales were. I'm going to hit save. And let's do something similar for Europe. And let's assume this is going to be up 5%. All right, so we have submitted a couple more products. We're going to talk about, okay, we want to do some type of review on the data. I'm going to keep that same page as before. I'm going to remove the Aimplan visual for now. I'm going to do a couple of formatting updates just with Tabular Editor. We'll do a compare versus 2018. Dollar compare, and then a percent compare as well. right, so we are seeing 6 million in forecast versus 2025 for 2018. With the primary driver being, okay, we don't have our forecast for mountain bikes set up yet. Let's go ahead and update this 2018 to try to only show products that have a forecast included, and then we'll do that compare. And this is where we can use one of two things, right? We have our status visual, and realistically that should be updated whenever a subcategory is loaded. But then we also created this additional table and then started using suggested values to get a couple more numbers in there. And rather than go in and click through every subcategory and clicking the new status or final or needs review, I'm just going to have kind of a measure filter on the subcategory for if forecast exists, show that value. So it looks a little bit cleaner. We still see a blank compare on widget subcategory. That's because we had created that new subcategory. There's no actuals for it. This is to be expected. I'll go back in the tabular editor, just do a small formatting update. So you have the ability to still leverage Power BI visuals using kind of your normal data modeling techniques. We could also do a Aimplan planning and reporting visual. And I am going to take what we already have in here. And we have the ability to use an alias in here. Let's update the styling or the number of formats. Let's go to 1 decimal. and change the styling. Putting these into thousandths. Alright, looks fairly clean. And let's talk about how we have our territory group. We can technically add a product grouping in here. And one thing we're going to do is just turn off editable. We don't want any of these to be changed. We'll have a spacer in between sections. And rather than have this always expanded, we're going to go ahead and turn that toggle off. And we can see, okay, what's our market breakout? What's our individual product category breakout? And showing those same views, still having the ability to expand if we want. If you want to filter out those that are not blank, that's going to come through. And so having that flexibility with the Aimplan visual, right? Like in order to do a market hierarchy and a product sub hierarchy separated, we'd most likely have to separate that out into two visuals. This can all be incorporated into one. You also have a little bit more flexibility on formatting, or like not having to go into each individual measure's format strings. It's all controlled within the custom visual. And I have it still add other sections if you wanted to have the comments in there. I think we'd have to expand that a little bit by product in order to see those. Let's also talk about a forecast review based on the status that is coming through. I'm going to keep the measure in there for now. And I'm going to try to get this to where essentially you can choose an individual subcategory, but then look at the right for what's coming through by territory group or by territory market. So territory and territory region and group. And this might not actually work with the bridge table for now. And with a little bit more time, you could definitely clean this up, make this look a little bit better. But say you've moved road bikes in a final, you don't necessarily care about those. This is going to be a page where you can track, okay, what has come into Nate's review as a supervisor and manager. Select the actual subcategory you want to review, and then reviewing whatever comparison periods you're talking about, right? Like what was the forecast by territory group, and then what's our comparison. For widgets, they don't have a 2018 view because we didn't have activity, but maybe you just want to see, okay, what is the split by market? Maybe it's even adding a measure in here. Related to total forecast. And so, okay, North America is getting 30% of the total forecast for the new widget subcategory. Does this split seem reasonable? You can continue to add or expand on these pages or build off of what we already have, right? So original forecast review was, I want to see everything or assume the forecasts have all been submitted and all moved into final, and you want to have some type of review page. You can still use your Power BI native matrix visual, or you can use Aimplan if you want to have a couple of different hierarchies, a couple of different ways to slice and dice the data. Comments can still come into the matrix visual as well. You're not required to use the Aimplan visuals for the read-only piece. In this case, it would be read-only because we're assuming that the forecast process or the forecast uploads have been reviewed and finalized. This is more the report out phase. Whereas maybe this is the in-between of, okay, tracking subcategories by status. We move into show items with no data, right? You're going to show all the items regardless. With this, I think the goal would be to have everything at the beginning of this process to be toggled to no work done, right? And then as individuals start working on it, they move it into, or once they're complete with their process, they move it into needs review. We had talked about another version from the portal. Right, so the not started, in progress, ready for review, and approved final was another variation. I just used 3 for this one for now, but that's completely flexible depending on how you want to structure that workflow process. All right, so we've done a forecast review page. The last piece is going to be a gross margin review page. This is going to also be utilizing the planning and reporting Aimplan visual. I'm going to try to use what we already have in place just from a efficiency standpoint. Let's go ahead and keep forecast amount. I'm going to keep everything but comments, actually. We'll see how this ends up looking. Back to tabular editor. All right, so we have a sales actual, we have a forecasted amount. We didn't necessarily forecast our cost amount, but let's go ahead and add a standard cost actuals. We'll just keep it as cost actuals. And we'll have that be based on sales total product cost. Then we'll do a gross margin. Make a copy of that. Gross margin. And I put this in a format string and not a folder. That's why. call this gross profit. And gross margin. And it looks like I already put the cost amount on there. I just delete that measure. All right, so we have a by year view, a by territory group view, and a by subcategory view. This is all just driven by actuals. We're not looking at the forecast amount currently. And I'm going to make a copy of this for a second. Right, we can technically accomplish our gross margin review with a basic Power BI native visual, right? Like this is, it's still possible. There's a way to still have some type of spacing on here. That's going to require a little bit more data modeling, but you have the normal setup of the measures being in columns with your dimension attribute in the row section. And we can have layers to where, okay, I want to have subcategory under territory group, or I want to have group under year, and have all three of those in there. Not saying you can't, but we're going to just kind of go over what you could do with an Aimplan. I changed my mind for a second time. Since we're just talking about actuals, and we're going to add all four of those same measures. We're going to start with maybe base accounts. And that's going to be sales actuals. Change this to subcategory, and we'll recreate just kind of a single version of one of the normal Power BI Data tables on the left. And just going through what we could limit this to for the purposes of the demo for now. And since we're not actually writing back data, taking out some of the unnecessary fields that are more when we're performing write back. All right, so that looks a lot better. And I have to do one override just for the gross margin. Override. And this has to do with the cross join, but hopefully this comes through as expected. So we go 61. We're going to actually do a calculated value. And this is where we can do our own mathematical operations in the visual. And give it an alias. Looks a lot better. Saying a 51% gross margin on helmets. And so we have our product subcategory along with our total. to align with what we see here. Hopefully bib shorts, if I look for that one, 31% and 31%. Okay, so this was recreating kind of what you see based on a normal Power BI visual. I think for the most part, whenever you're building a financial statement, you are probably exporting all your ledger detail, and you're not going to have a column for every account, right? So you have, with this sales table, a sales amount, a product cost, an extended amount, discount references. Realistically, you're probably going to have a new table that has account in one column and then amount in another. We're going to actually recreate that. After thinking about it a little bit more, I think we're going to break this into another section or another video. We will still have our 90-minute Aimplan challenge, part 1 and part 2, going over all of these different examples or areas. And then what we'll most likely do is expand this to maybe a developer series and have multiple videos. I'll continue to add to it as we cover more of the intermediate and advanced topics. But what I think we'll probably have included in the next video is not just your gross margin in the row sections, but a full P&L statement. And then maybe tie that with multi-level hierarchy comments and how that would be structured or set up within Aimplan. But for the purposes of this last video, just covering the basics of status updates, forecast review pages, and then a basic gross margin review, the differences between the Power BI native matrix visual and what you can do in the planning and reporting visual. But as for further expansion on the gross margin, I'll probably just include that in a full P&L type of structure setup. Thank you to everyone who watched this and stayed with us for both part 1 and part 2. Feel free to reach out if you have any questions, or if you have any other topics you'd want us to cover in this type of series, just let us know. Thank you.